In my main channel segment today, I mentioned an NPR story where they shut down an investigation, silenced the reporters involved, and even went after one of the guy's wives. Now, I want to do an actual deep dive into this and point out a few things. It's an example of why we have to be very skeptical when dealing with the press, and it's unfortunate. Because if you have doubt in their reporting, well then who are you supposed to believe? But I also want to point out, NPR broke the story, uncovering that Bloomberg News was doing this. So at the same time, we're still kind of a, +1, -1 position. I respect NPR for breaking this news, calling out Bloomberg for their lack of ethics. But at the same time, you got to be careful who you trust. At this point, I guess all we can really say is don't trust Bloomberg. I think that's fairly easy to understand. And NPR, while not perfect, does a fairly good job. Let's read the story from the Daily Caller. They say, Bloomberg editor-in-chief reportedly killed a story to appease Chinese Communist Party, quote, Nazis. That's who they are. We should have no illusions, they say in quotes. The story says, Bloomberg News allegedly killed a story about the wealth of Communist Party elites in China 6 years ago to appease the country, and then sought to silence both the reporter and his wife. The publication not only successfully censored the story at the time, but also was able to silence all reporters involved in the story, according to NPR, who broke the news. Bloomberg News reportedly tried to keep one of the reporter's wives silent in an attempt to kill the news. Here's a quote. It has to be done with a strategic framework and a tactical method that is smart enough to allow us to continue and not run afoul of the Nazis, that's China, who are in front of us and behind us everywhere, Bloomberg's founding editor-in-chief, Matthew Winkler, said in a 2013 phone call about whether to run the story, according to audio verified by NPR. And that's who they are, and we should have no illusions about it. Former Bloomberg Beijing correspondent Mike Forsyth was among a team of journalists that reported an award-winning investigation in 2012 on China's ruling classes, and specifically about how they acquired their wealth. Bloomberg News published this story despite warnings from the Chinese ambassador, according to NPR. Forsyth and his wife, journalist Letta Hong Fincher, moved to Hong Kong after the 2012 investigation came out and receiving what they viewed as death threats. There, Forsyth and the team tried to further their 2012 investigation, this time focusing on Chinese leaders' ties to Wang Jianlin, the nation's wealthiest man. Included in this new investigation was Chinese President Xi Jinping's family, NPR reported. The story never saw the light of day under Bloomberg News. Surprise, surprise. Mike and some of the other reporters and editors who had been working on this story were just asking for answers about why was this story killed, Fincher said. Winkler got involved in October 2013 after radio silence from Bloomberg News headquarters in New York City. Senior news executives and the China-based investigative team were on the private conference call, NPR reported. Winkler admitted in the phone call that fear of backlash from China made the story not worth running, referring to the country as Nazis. Let me tell you something. Yeah, sure, I agree with that sentiment, and nothing will ever be done unless you report on it. Many journalists have fearlessly reported on what China has been doing, notably to the Uyghurs and other very horrifying things, and others are spineless and would back away because they're scared. Quote, it is for sure going to, invite the Communist Party to, completely shut us down and kick us out of the country, Winkler said. So I just don't see that as a story that is justified. The interference is going to be interpreted by the government there as we are judging them, and they will probably kick us out of the country. They will probably shut us down, is my guess. When the story got shut down, two Bloomberg editors and Winkler said it needed more reporting, according to NPR. The audio recordings show that Bloomberg News was likely just worried about losing business in China, NPR reported. Isn't that what it always is? Special interests. These news organizations aren't here to tell you the truth. They're here to wield their influence to the benefit of their clients. You are the product. Don't forget it. You see, many people, you need to understand this. When you get something for free, it's because you're the product. That's what they say, right? When you can read a news website for free, they are selling you to an advertiser. The same is true for any other organization that needs influence. If you can read the story for free, somebody else paid for it. Or they're right. That's the point. You've got political parties, you've got special interest groups trying to buy you. When the NPR described how China made life difficult for the publication after its 2012 story was published. Chinese authorities reportedly delayed visas for reporters and made attempts to affect former New York City Mike Bloomberg's main product. After the first investigative project ran in 2012, the Chinese authorities had searched Bloomberg News' bureaus, delayed visas for reporters, and ordered state-owned companies not to sign new leases for Bloomberg's primary product, its terminals, according to NPR. So what? So you leave. Grow a spine, perhaps. If Bloomberg makes its money on terminals, it gains prestige and greater name recognition from its news division. Many of its stories, predominantly on business and finance, appear first on the terminal. At the time the story was being pursued, China was seen as a growing market and a strategic priority, according to 3 former Bloomberg executives. Even Bloomberg, who was the mayor of New York City at the time, denied the report had been squashed. Bloomberg had officially stepped back from the publication at the time, but was actually in frequent contact and shared his aspirations for growth in China, NPR reported. Quote, "Nobody thinks we are wusses and not willing to stand up and write stories that are of interest to the public and that are factually correct," Bloomberg first said about the story, according to NPR. Bloomberg officially returned to the company 2 months later. His run as New York City mayor over, he appeared to change his original comments during a January 2014 town hall for the newsroom. Audio of Bloomberg's comments were obtained by NPR. Quote, "If a country gives you the license to do something with certain restrictions, you have 2 choices," Bloomberg said. "You either accept the license and do it that way, or you don't do business there. Or you use other methods and you hire locals and you find a way to get the free press to function. If they say you can't operate here, hire somebody else. Okay. If they say you can't operate here because they're doing things they don't want exposed, what value is your company anyway?" Oh, I think this is it. I think they're just basically admitting it to us. What do we see? We see this company saying our interest is not in reporting factual news that would be bad for those in power. Our business is in wielding influence. That's it. So when the government comes out and says, not this story, and they say, you got it, what are they really doing? Are they trying to make sure you, the reader, know what's happening in the world? No, they're not. They're trying to just manipulate you in whatever way possible to get ad revenue and sell products to their clients, including, in this case, Bloomberg terminals. They don't want to risk their business. This is the problem we're facing with journalism, man. This describes so much of what is going on. Forsyth was suspended from Bloomberg News at the end of 2013 after being accused of spreading the internal conflicts around to other media outlets. Bloomberg News then fired Forsyth, and he was eventually hired by the New York Times. Both Forsyth and his wife, Fincher, were pressured into signing a non-disclosure agreement. Forsyth signed, as did other journalists who were on the team. Bloomberg News also threatened lawsuits against Forsyth and Fincher, according to NPR. There was no reason why I should have to sign a non-disclosure agreement because I didn't possess any damaging material about the company, according to Fincher, who never signed the agreement. Still, Bloomberg LP tried to pressure Fincher into signing the agreement and even promise that she would never criticize the company. Forsyth was also accused of stealing intellectual property and sharing it with his wife. The company finally dropped their alleged harassment and attempts to censor after Fincher hired the Hong Kong lawyers who had represented journalist Edward Snowden. Wow, bravo, good sir. The New York Times published Forsyth's report that had been killed by Bloomberg News over a year later in 2015. As much as I have a lot to drag the New York Times for, lo and behold, Bloomberg is untrustworthy. They are, as far as I can tell, corrupt. But guess what? The New York Times just ran defense for Joe Biden. So what do you do, man? I honestly don't know. Did the New York Times ever come out and tell us this story about what had really happened? As far as I can tell, they didn't. It was NPR that broke the story. So I can respect NPR for doing that. It's hard to know who to trust. Everybody has limits. Even I've said there are certain things I can't talk about on certain channels because YouTube would ban me outright. But I assure you, I have stated over and over again, there is a line. If there was ever something that was extremely important for the public to know, nothing would stand in my way to actually report on that. When I talk about things I don't do on YouTube, I talk about basically like I don't swear or I don't say the name of a certain CIA official because they'll just outright ban the video. And then I get no information to you. So it would basically, sacrifice everything to say a single word. If it comes down to a legit story, like the coronavirus pandemic, I took the hit on that across the board. Revenue dropped substantially because YouTube kept saying, we will demonetize you if you talk about this. And I said, I got to talk about it. Finally, they relented. But yeah, I'm absolutely willing to report news. I don't care what China or anyone else thinks. And because of my opinions on China, I've had a bunch of people coming after me and smearing me on social media. So I'll tell you what, nobody's perfect. Everybody has limits, and there really are, important conversations to be had about where you can draw the line. For me, I completely disagree with them. If China's going to kick you out, make it a spectacle. If you got a story and they say, if you report this, we'll ban you from the country, I say, bring it on. We'll make that the story next. Otherwise, you can accept the criticism. It's not the end of the world. It'll be a bad story. You'll get over it. But if you kick me out, I'll make sure that's the biggest story and then everyone will know you did. And then that will make the story even bigger. It's called the Streisand effect. But they don't want to do it. Why? Because they want to sell terminals. That's what it's really about. They want to make money. This is what you can expect from the press. I'll leave it there. I got a couple more segments for you coming up in a few minutes, and I will see you all shortly.